This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. Boris Johnson's being warned that silent loyalists in the House of Lords are preparing to block his bill that seeks to override the Brexit treaty he signed with the EU. Former Tory leader Lord Howard's among those who appear to be rebelling against him, as the EU itself threatens to call off talks unless it's withdrawn. As our editorial column points out, it's not the only trouble the Prime Minister's facing.
Boris Johnson is facing two significant revolts from within his own ranks. The first is over the government's new coronavirus restrictions and the failure to exempt the under-12s from the ban on social gatherings of more than 6 people. The second is on his decision to break international law in the Internal Market Bill unveiled this week in preparation for Brexit. The Evening Standard has much sympathy with the government as it grapples with the challenge of trying to prevent a second wave of infections, with the accompanying loss of life and economic harm. Yet the cause of the second rebellion is far less comprehensible. To start with, it's wrong in principle for the government to deliberately break the law. It's a tactical mistake too, for several reasons. One is that it shattered the Tory unity over Brexit. It's shameful that this law-breaking idea ever surfaced. A swift reversal to scrap it is essential.
Our political editor Joe Murphy is with me. Joe, can this rebellion really stop the bill from passing?
Well, there's two threats, David. One's in the House of Commons and the other is in the House of Lords. Now, with a majority of 80, you might think Boris Johnson has nothing to worry about in the Commons, but of course that's not true because, as I always say, an 80-seat majority means 18 nervous MPs. On this occasion, the main amendment that's gone down so far from Bob Neal, the Bromley and Chislehurst MP, who's chairman of the Justice Committee, is there on the order paper, but some experts, and the whips are telling this to MPs, are saying it's flawed, it won't achieve what you want because it actually wouldn't stop the government from going ahead and doing its own thing, and therefore it'll never be acceptable to the EU. The second threat is much more serious at the moment, though that could change round, is in the House of Lords, because you've now got a huge number of really serious Tory grandees saying, well, this is unacceptable behaviour. You have William Hague, Michael Howard, two Tory leaders saying that. In the Commons, you have Theresa May, but you also have Lord Lamont, like Lord Howard, a great Brexiteer who's pretty hard line. They are both saying the government shouldn't do this. And what you've now got as well is what's described to me as the silent loyalists. The guys who just quietly go along with the votes most days and don't kick up on anything. But several of them are saying to their colleagues, no, we can't go along with this. So if there's going to be defeat, at the moment it looks like it'll be in the House of Lords, most likely.
What about inside those talks themselves, Joe? Is it difficult? Is it getting hard? Are all the things the EU's saying are problems actually problems?
Well, putting my ear to the door this afternoon, what I'm hearing is that those talks were more constructive than you might expect. So it does seem possible that for all the sound and fury outside and the sound bites to the cameras from Brussels and so on, that people are getting on with business. But when you press for detail of, well, how positive is this? Are we getting closer together on fishing, for example? And I'm told, no, we need a huge change on fish numbers, and the EU are remotely realistic enough, to use the British jargon, about what an independent coastal state should be allowed to take from its own waters. And in other areas, I'm told it's positive because we're now having discussions about areas. Well, we've got weeks left before this whole process finishes, and it seems that we're not looking at the text of deals here. We're looking at finally having discussions.
I was interested that Nancy Pelosi from the US last night was also criticising what's going on. Is there a danger to the UK's international reputation?
Of course there is, although practical politicians do point out that actually breaches of international treaties are something that happens on a regular basis, and you'll find the government sources pulling out precedents involving all sorts of countries, including Germany. But realistically, what matters is the effect in other countries, and on Capitol Hill, there's a big contingent of representatives and senators who are sympathetic to Dublin, and they are saying they'll block a trade deal, and that is a practical consequence that will hurt this country's hopes of a more prosperous time across the Atlantic.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.